I'm a news dude, and here's some more news. Brett Kavanaugh! Let's take a quick break from untrustworthy possible sex criminals for our new segment, This Week in History. This week in history, 3 justices of the Supreme Court were confirmed. Justice Earl Warren in 1953, Justice Thurgood Marshall in 1967, and Justice David Souter in 1990. And that feels a little relevant this week, as we have not yet confirmed, but still might confirm Brett Kavanaugh, a controversial nomination due to his history of not having the vast majority of his records as a public servant made available for review, and being accused of sexual assault by multiple women. Judge Kavanaugh, who will no doubt one day ascend to Chief Justice Kavanaugh due to his compelling history of never being held accountable for the shitty things he's done and then continuously lying under oath about them, spent the final hours of his nomination proceedings in front of the Senate Judicial Committee, shouting about how much he loves beer. But don't let that discourage you. Just because he vociferously denounced every allegation as part of a Democratic conspiracy to avenge the Clintons and vowed that the Democratic Party will
reap the whirlwind
for daring to question his fitness for service based on serious and plausible concerns about his character, doesn't necessarily mean that he'll overturn every major progressive decision made by the Supreme Court in the past few decades, even though he refuses to say that he won't, and has all but stood out on the steps of Congress with a bullhorn and specifically announced that he's going to overturn Roe v. Wade and Obergefell v. Hodges, the gay marriage ruling. After all, it's not like Lindsey Graham, the waxen villain from a John Grisham novel, stopped by Sean Hannity's show after Kavanaugh's final hearing to eat some celebratory Chick-fil-A nuggets, the only chicken nuggets on the market that oppose gay marriage, which chicken nuggets shouldn't be able to do. He actually did do that. Then, presumably, he spent the rest of his victory lap kicking back with a mint julep and shouting at interracial couples from his front porch. But what about all those other justices that were confirmed on this same week in history? What context can they provide to either soothe our fears or blow a handful of glass into our eyes? Well, conservatives hated the butt out of Earl Warren, even though he was a Republican. Under Warren's tenure as Chief Justice, the Supreme Court issued such landmark rulings as Brown versus Board of Education, the right of criminal defendants to have access to a public defense attorney, and the ruling that having forced prayer in public schools was unconstitutional. Of course, as Attorney General of California, Warren also supported the placement of Japanese Americans into concentration camps and the forced eugenic sterilization of California's undesirables, which is a phrase here meaning Mexicans, Indians, Asians, and the poor. So, bit of a mixed bag. Warren also headed up the Warren Commission, which failed to identify President John F. Kennedy's true killer, Ted Cruz's dad. Justice David Souter was nominated by President George H.W. Bush in 1990, a nomination designed to be a shoo-in less controversial than President Ronald Reagan's infamously contested pick of Robert Bork, who was ultimately rejected. Bork was, of course, referenced in the Kavanaugh hearings by glistening plantation owner Lindsey Graham, who insisted that Kavanaugh's treatment was the worst he'd seen of a Supreme Court pick since Bork. Among other things, Bork supported the implementation of a poll tax in southern states and was one of only 3 Supreme Court candidates to ever be opposed by the ACLU. So, good job, Bork. Souter's nomination was intensely opposed by the National Organization for Women, who feared he would overturn Roe v. Wade and the NAACP. Despite this civic opposition, Souter's nomination was approved almost unanimously, and he went on to not be that bad, actually. When Planned Parenthood v. Casey literally gave him the opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade, he didn't. And he wound up aligning himself with the liberal members of the court for the rest of his career. In fact, much like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's sudden heel turn after winning our hearts as the people's champion, Souter's unexpected liberal bent was viewed as such a betrayal by conservatives that he's pretty much the reason the GOP stopped nominating middle-of-the-road bipartisan candidates and went full Scalia. So, maybe even the liar and bad judge, Brett Kavanaugh, will turn out to be a stealth Souter, and all of our fears of the erosion of women's reproductive rights and equal marriage will have been unfounded. But it seems way more likely he'll be an Earl Warren, a guy who firmly straddles the line between the right and wrong sides of history, a Harvey Two-Face of judicial opinions that occasionally lands right side up. But it seems even more likely that he's a liar and a sex pest who lies and shouldn't be on the Supreme Court. Call your senator. Roll the credits. Call your senator. Hey everybody, we didn't really mention Thurgood Marshall in this episode other than saying he was confirmed this week in history. It wasn't really relevant anything else other than that, so that's why. And anyway, like and subscribe the video, leave comments, do the YouTube stuff, visit our Patreon if you want to support us, and listen to our podcast, and go look up about Thurgood Marshall if you care.